General Richardson, I'll give you a chance to talk in a little bit more detail about the Panama Canal because I was troubled by the brief comments you had to Senator Inhofe of all the things you've described that China is doing in your area of responsibility. I think the strategic investments it's made along the Panama Canal is most striking. I know that this is primarily a State Department and Treasury matter, but can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on around the canal and how Southcom plays into the interagency efforts to counter the threat, and what else you'd like to see from the U.S. government to do so?
Thank you for the question, Senator. We work very closely with Panama, and our Corps of Engineers just was able to negotiate a water tender contract with Panama, which I think is huge because it's been 15 years in the making. And so we have a lot of ground to make up with Panama. But in terms of the investment, China and the strategic investments that they make, just like the Panama Canal, when you enter and exit and on either side, you have Chinese state-owned enterprises. And what I worry about Chinese state-owned enterprises that have capability and infrastructure there is that they can be used for dual use, which means civilian but also military. And quite honestly, if you just look at where the port projects are, 29 port projects in the AOR in 17 countries. I mean, these are very methodically thought out, in my opinion. And again, I worry about the access that they get in there under the guise of infrastructure and looking like they're helping economies when they're really not, as well as the resources that are in this AOR. It's just off the charts. I've got 60% of the world's lithium in the lithium triangle in South America. That's in Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. You've got 31% of the world's fresh water. You have the Amazon. You have the oil reserves in Venezuela, the light sweet crude that was discovered off the shores of Guyana. There are a lot of resources in this region. And again, I go back to it's not an investment by our competitors. It's there to extract in some way, shape, or form.
What do you think China is up to there in all those investments around the canal? Is it more about advancing their own interests or holding at risk and threatening ours?
I think it's both.
I mean, we depend on the canal more because of our geography than does China, right?
I would say yes, but the Panama Canal as well as the Strait of Magellan, in my AOR, those two very strategic global lines of communication must remain open.
I agree. I mean, should we ever have a conflict with China, the decisive effort would be somewhere in the Western Pacific, not in the Caribbean Basin or the Eastern Pacific. And it's the very essence of strategy to try to force your adversary to defend what he has no choice but to defend, far removed from the theater of decision. That's one reason I'm so worried about these investments around the canal. You know, the Panama Canal Treaty was actually two treaties. One of them was the Neutrality Treaty. We retain under that Neutrality Treaty the uncontested right to ensure the neutral operation of the canal, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Good. One other area I wanted to discuss was agriculture. I know this is somewhat removed from Department of Defense's lane, but as we heard, you have no assigned forces, and a lot of what you do is with interagency partners and looking at non-military, non-traditional ways to cooperate. Sometimes people overlook the importance of agriculture. I don't think China overlooks it if you consider their investments in South America, especially targeting crops like soybeans. I think this economic investment seems to be aimed at creating alternative markets for them to buy as well as to crowd out our exports. Fortunately for us, Brazil's soybean crop didn't compare so well to ours, especially in Arkansas. Can you give me your thoughts on how you can work with agencies like AID and the trade representative to dissuade countries in your area of responsibility from continuing down the path of further economic entanglement with China in the agriculture domain?
So, Senator, we work very closely, as I mentioned before, regarding the folks that we have that work in the Western Hemisphere. And so we have a very close working relationship with USAID. And I've met with Director Powers previously, and then she travels the region as well. But none of us have the resources, and so I think that helps us work together more collaboratively across all of the interagency and work so close together to figure out how we can invest in this region. But I'd also like to highlight that China gets 36% of its food source from this AOR as well. And so the AOR just has a lot of resources that are being eyed by our competitors.
Yeah, they are. And I think this is going to be a matter of growing importance this year, given the war in Ukraine and how much grain Ukraine and Russia provide to the rest of the world, as well as how many inputs they provide into fertilizer or other agricultural inputs, not only in increasing prices on our grocery shelves here in America, but also threats to stability in your region and in Africa and the Middle East, in places that have pretty fragile governments and very limited food supplies. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cobb.